Welcome to Not What I Thought. I'm Erika.
I'm Yolanda.
And I'm Becca. We're therapists, entrepreneurs, and perfectly imperfect humans.
We first met during a business owner retreat where we became fast friends because we're not afraid to be real and ask the hard questions about life. What we thought it would be like, how messy it actually is, and the courage it takes to create the life we want.
We continue to build our friendship and personal growth through our own retreats. We find the deepest connection in sharing our struggles and finding what we have in common rather than what divides us.
We're breaking down hard topics on our podcast and together have conversations about what it takes to find real talk, real support, and real rest for professional women. We're glad you're here. Join us on your favorite podcast platform. I want to talk about being a parent of very young kids.
Oh, it's not what you thought it would be.
And it was not what I thought it would be. I grew up with this expectation that motherhood was like the pinnacle of womanhood. And all of this messaging about how this is what's going to make you the happiest. Oh. This is where you will be the most fulfilled in your life.
Yes.
And, you know, like maybe you could have a career if you really needed to, or a lot of it was you would maybe have your career until you had children. And then obviously you would leave work because you need to be here with your kids, right? So that's kind of the background. And then fast forward to, I am on maternity leave after having my second. So I'm spending my days at home with like a preschooler, 3.5 years old, and an infant, and trying to care for the infant and recovering from birth myself and keeping this preschooler entertained for 12 hours a day while my husband commutes to his job and then, you know, has a long commute home. And I remember one time I added up how many times in a day I washed my hands. Between like, I go to the bathroom, I wash my hands, I change a diaper, I wash my hands, I help the preschooler use the potty and I wash my hands, and then make someone a snack, and then like all over and over and over again. And we have a dishwasher in that place that we lived in, and so I was doing dishes with just like my poor hands, right?
So how many times?
I don't remember it anymore, but just being like, that's but it was such a lonely time for me. Yeah. Lonely. And also, honestly, very boring. Yeah. I loved these little people, but for me personally, it was boring. I didn't want to watch. These weren't books I wanted to read. These weren't shows I wanted to watch, right? And there's like a little bit of it that's fun to do with your kids, but when you're looking at like day after day after day of all of the same thing. And I had this realization of like, oh, this thing that I was sold, this thing that I was told about how this is where you're going to be the happiest,
most fulfilled,
the most fulfilled. I was like, I've been sold a bill of goods. Like this is a pile of garbage. And not the children themselves, but like just having this realization that like, this isn't it. These days of wiping butts and cutting grapes in half so they're not a choking hazard, and you know, all like this is not the pinnacle of where I'm going to find happiness and fulfillment in my life.
Oh, I can feel the tension in all of our bodies.
Oh wait, it's just landed in the room. Oh my gosh, yeah.
So like, what made you realize that, or what did you do with it once they like clicked?
I don't know that I did anything with it right away. I mean, I'm remembering during that time I joined a mom's group on Meetup because I realized I have friends, but my friends are all people that I either know from grad school or that I knew from work. And like, I don't have anybody to call. I don't have anybody to hang out with who's available in the middle of the workday. And so I took some steps to make sure that I was making some friends who were in a similar situation that I was in. And my youngest is now almost 9, and I'm still friends with
Mhm.
a lot of the people that I met in that group.
You survived.
We
You were in the
survived
trenches
together.
together. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I also really reconsidered the cultural expectation that I should be a stay-at-home mom with my kids. And it wasn't too long after that, maybe a year and a half later, is when I started my private practice. And I did that part-time, and as I was building it, kind of worked around still being available for my kids and being able to pick them up from school and, you know, all of the things. And I think a lot of that still was because that's what I felt like I was supposed to do, the expectation of that. But I started taking my own happiness a lot more seriously. And like I said, letting go of any expectation or guilt around like I should be a stay-at-home mom. And I say that without, I want to be clear, any criticism for people who do make that choice. It just was very clear to me, this is not where I am going to find my happiness, because this is not doing it for me. Yeah.
So you said I started taking my own happiness more seriously. Like what happened there? Like what? Like you woke up one morning and it's like, no,
I'm gonna be happy.
I'm gonna take my happiness seriously.
I think it was like realizing that prioritizing my friendships mattered. I needed to have my life not just be all about my kids. I think it was around that time too that I joined a book club that I would go to once a month, and that was a production sometimes to figure out how I was going to get the kids to my husband so that he could watch them while I went to the thing. I remember the first couple of times, I think I took my youngest one with me. She was nursing. And so it wasn't like convenient, but I realized this is a thing that matters to me, and a place where I'm getting socialization. And I would actually, contrary to most stereotypes about book club, I did actually read the book. But I think that was important for me too, to have some kind of intellectual stimulation. And then, like I said, with growing my practice also, that at the beginning, where it was so part-time, it wasn't really about income at the beginning. It was that I need my career to not be totally stagnant. And I need to have something to do where I feel like all my skills and knowledge are getting put to use, where I feel like I have a purpose that's outside of my family. And not that that diminishes my purpose within my family at all, but that I am someone, I am more than this set of roles.
Yeah, a very similar situation. Well, I didn't have, I guess, the family roles, I guess, messaging the same, but I definitely felt that, you know, pressure. Like, okay, got to do this. You got to stay at home, and
this is what a quote unquote good mom.
This is what a good mom does. I mean, I always knew I was going back to work, but even my husband asked me to take the full 12 weeks maternity leave, and I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, you'll really want to do it. Okay. And by like week 2, I was like, I actually really don't want to do this.
10 more weeks of this.
This is a lot. It's a long time, you know. It is very lonely experience. And I guess the other part of mine, which maybe we'll talk about on a different episode, was breastfeeding, which
I was thinking,
you know, I kind of did mainly at his request. I thought it was important as well. He doesn't ask me for much, so I felt like, okay, this is a thing we can do. But then being alone all day when it's not working out, and then I was becoming angry, like very angry that this was all happening. And that's not the kind of mom I want to be either, right? Or wife or person. So yeah, it was definitely all of that mixed in. Like, how am I a good mom, but also like a full person and operating in the world, and having my own identity and purpose. It's a lot. Yeah,
it is a lot. So much societal expectation. My story is a little bit different in that I didn't have a career before we had kids, because we got married really young, and you know, we started having kids right away because of my own health conditions. And we had 3 kids in 4 years. So like boom, boom, boom. And it is this sense, or I had a similar sense of like, the messaging is like, this is perfectly natural and this should fulfill everything in your life and this is what you were created for. And again, that like being a mom is one of the most cornerstone things. It's like the one of the most important things that I do in my life. And it is lonely. And I was similar to you, Erika, in that breastfeeding my first one was really hard. And so it's like this thing that is supposed to be natural, that like if
your body just knows what to do.
Right. Yeah. That's the messaging that is out there, right? Like, oh, it's not work. And so I'm like, well, how am I messing this? Like, what am I doing to mess this up?
Yeah.
Right? And what that doesn't bode well for me being a mom, and like, how am I going to raise these kids? I don't know. And so it wasn't until, our daughter, who's our youngest, was really starting preschool and stuff that I realized that I needed to go back to school. And I was like, I'm supposed to be a therapist. And so, that's when all of that started. But I look back now and I wish that I could go and put my arm around my younger self and say, sweetheart, cut yourself some slack. Just cut yourself some slack. Everything is going to be okay. They're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Like being a mom is one of the biggest roles in my life. And also it can't be the only one because it's not good for me and it's not good for my kids either. Right. So it took me a while to really acknowledge that and let it sink in and be like, yeah, like these things can coexist. Right. But I was much farther down the road in losing myself because I don't think I really had a good sense because I was so young and didn't have a career and like all of that. I didn't really know who I was. Like going back to school is part of me discovering that. And so by the time I did do that, I hated everybody.
I'm seeing a recurring theme.
I'm exhausted and I'm resentful and like these little people are sucking the life out of me.
This is maybe me going kind of cynical with it, but I think about who is it that paints us that picture that this is what we're supposed to want with our life. This is where we're going to be the most fulfilled. And who does that serve?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes that the picture of the, like idyllic family and mom's at home and she's doing the cooking and whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, that's maybe something that's idealized by the person who isn't doing it.
Yeah.
Right. I think about now, I would love to have a partner at home who could take care of all of that stuff. And I can go to work and I get to, like, I want to, I can go home.
Dinner's ready.
Dinner's ready, right? Somebody else did the laundry. Someone else is coordinating, making sure that the kids get picked up from school and everything. Or maybe with some nostalgia, we're looking back at like, wasn't it so great that I had someone who took care of me when I was younger? Right. And we do that without really realizing maybe the toll that took on our mothers or grandmothers or caretakers.
Yeah.
And so we kind of expect something of ourselves that isn't actually even real because we were seeing it through a kid's eyes.
Yeah. You were gonna.
Yeah, I was just saying that was a very interesting thought because I've been sitting here kind of thinking through messaging, right? And like my mom worked and since I can remember my whole life. But she always would say she didn't really want to work. She wanted to have a bunch of kids and like be home. And because of her health condition, she couldn't have a bunch of kids. And so then, her life took a different path. But so when you said, sometimes these messages are from people who haven't done it. Yeah. My mom hasn't done it and she didn't put pressure on me in any way to do that. But hearing her thoughts about like how wonderful that must be to have all these kids at home, maybe, and maybe not. Yeah.
I grew up in a home where my mom worked a lot. And so I think in some ways it was like I wanted to give my kids an experience of something that I didn't have, that I idealized. Right? And also we were very much more involved in like a very conservative kind of realm in church and that kind of thing, where that's the expectation or that's, that's just kind of what you do. And again, the messaging there is emphasized are reinforced by men who are not fulfilling the roles, right? And then in my perfectionism, I just add, on top of it, like, I'm like, well, if it's supposed to look like that, then I'm going to make it look like
all the
this.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and again,
I'm just thinking, what if Pinterest was around then?
I know, right? I'm so glad that, look, I would not be a functioning human being
Right.
if I had all of that.
All the things have to be look like this.
No, yeah. I mean, all of the like gender reveal and like the, I look back at pictures of my kids' birthday cakes and I'm like, well, that was a solid effort. There wasn't a Pinterest, but I just threw some stuff in a pan.
Looks really good.
Looks like a construction zone. That's what it's supposed to look like. Yeah. And again, it's not to diminish the role of mom.
No.
None of us are saying that, right? I spent a lot of years staying at home, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. And also I wish if I were to do it again, I don't know that I wouldn't stay home. I would have liked to bring a little bit different kind of balance into it. Because we did the play groups and stuff, and that was good. Like we were moms in the trenches together. But outside of that, it was not a whole bunch of like, maybe every once in a while we'd have a pampered chef party and go out in the evening without the kids. And, it was like, like who am I as a human being?
Yes, I think there's these other ways that we maybe idealize certain roles, and particularly caregiving roles for women that end up not necessarily serving them, but serving other people. And I had this experience when my oldest was starting to go to school that again, because it was a script that I had been given, I thought like, well, I need to get involved at the school because that's just what you do. Right? That's what you should do. That's what moms do. And so, long story short, I ended up being involved in the PTA for a couple of years. And part of what was frustrating in my experience there was this realization that one, as a society, at least in America, we are so underfunding our schools that they only really function dependent on a bunch of free labor from women who will show up and make this stuff happen. And then in our particular school, I felt like there was this deep disrespect from the administration at the school for the time that the parents were contributing.
Wow.
But it's like they would just change the rules on you last second, or we had planned we're coordinating all of these things so that we can fit their rules for what volunteers at the campus need to do. And then they would just go, oh, well, the room's double booked. You guys can't come at that time.
Wow.
We've all like arranged babysitters and called in favors and whatever so that we can be here to set this thing up. And we also don't have access to the room schedule.
Oh, wow.
So it's not our fault that the room got double booked. That's on you. Right. But then there was just this kind of disregard. And maybe that's an extreme way to say it. Maybe at the very least it was like taken for granted that
not really
that you would figure
showing
it out.
the appreciation,
right? That we would figure it out, right? When
they get it done anyway,
right? Yeah. When at the school that I was at, it's mostly working class families, and so there aren't a lot of parents that just have the privilege that they can just be at home. So when we're asking parent volunteers, it is people who are taking time off work or they're foregoing some other thing so that they can show up. And then the school just, like I said, kind of took for granted that people would always be there.
Yeah.
And I got really kind of jaded from the whole experience. It's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And also for me being a self-employed person, yes, I have the flexibility in my schedule that I can show up for things, but that always comes at a cost. Like I am foregoing earning income to show up and do this thing. And why? Yeah. I don't know if you all have other experiences with that kind of either PTA specifically or where it's taken for granted or assumed that you will provide free labor.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of like a bunch of different things are coming to mind, like working the nursery at church, right? That's a big one. It's like, well, of course you need to be there. Like these are your kids in the these are your kids in the nursery. So, like, okay, well, I mean, I could stay at home and watch my kids.
Right.
Also, like teen moms for the kids and
Sporting.
the sporting events, and I mean, just kind of fill in the blank. Dance moms or Cub Scout moms, or just kind of across the board. Like we need volunteers to come in and take care of these things. And it's so funny because my husband, as our kids, they were really involved in sports, and my husband was their coach a lot of times, and sometimes I was the team mom, sometimes other moms were the team moms, but it's like the team mom is the one who's coordinating like the coach appreciation things, and it's like there's no one going, hey team mom, wait a minute.
We appreciate you,
right? There's no one going like, wow, you created the snack schedule, you like all of that, like
you're basically running all the things except the actual sport.
yeah. And it's just like, yeah, well, isn't that great that we've got someone to make sure that there's snacks for the team and to appreciate the coach. And it is like that kind of collective expectation of like, well, they'll do it. Someone will step in, someone will do it. I think especially like the church nursery. And I'm like, well, what would happen if I were just like, no, I'm not going to do it. Right. What if I go on strike?
The church nursery is kind of a great example too of like where really we need the community to be thinking differently about the needs of women.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're your kids, but also like, could we not show up to support the moms of the young kids and give them a break? Let someone else who is safe and trusted, right, watch the kids so that the mom can either just have a break or so that the mom and her like spirituality and spiritual growth gets to be prioritized, that she can go participate in the service. Right. And it's like that just gets
I think
blows away in the wind.
And I think of some of the leadership roles that I've held before in the church, and this is not church bashing at all. This is just kind of the way that at least it has been in my experience that I would lead Bible studies, and it wasn't enough that I was leading the Bible study and preparing and all of that stuff. It was my responsibility to find someone to take care of the kids during it's like all of that, and and then like make sure there are snacks there for everybody, and it's just like, oh my goodness. And then, just that's exhausting when you're staying at home and taking care of your kids and feeling lonely and isolated, and you're like, I'm trying to have a sense of community and something beyond, in addition to, I guess, my role as mom and parent that's going to be filling for me. And so I think, these are, what we're talking about is just kind of examples of how the ideas are reinforced. Like you should just be happy with this, the way that it's presented, like just be happy with being a mom and like all of the expectations that come along with it, and ignore that part of you that's like, wait a minute.
But I find even the expectations that the way they're communicated to us are really downplayed. So all I need you to do, Yolanda, as the sports mom, is you have to bring some water. Right. And then your list is actually like this long.
Just bring a snack. Right. But there's a halftime snack and there's an end of game snack. And oh, by the way, there are all these food sensitivities that you have to take into combination, and they need to be healthy snacks.
They can't make crumbs.
Right.
Any mess.
That is such a good point about how it's communicated. It's just this. All I need is it's a small thing.
Small thing. You need a small favor.
Yeah. Right. No big deal. It never is.
Yeah. There's always so much involved.
Right. The planning that like maybe picking up some Capri Suns, that's not a big deal. Right. Sure. But everything that goes into like,
if you're told Tuesday, bring Capri Suns. Cool. Got you.
Right.
Then when you take on the mental load of Okay, but then Erika needs to do it on Wednesday and Becca needs to do it on
Mhm.
Thursday, and we need to make sure we didn't get the same flavor of
Right.
every sense.
Right. And when do I have time to run to the store, and I gotta load the kids up in the car and like all of
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So what does your heart know about this, Becca?
My heart knows I am more than the roles that other people need me to fill for them, that I matter. My happiness and getting my needs met should matter at least as much as the happiness and getting needs met of everyone else in the family. And that it's okay for me to not follow all of the scripts or all of the supposed to's.
Yeah.
What does your heart know?
My heart knows that a lot of people don't get me, and also that's okay. I
That's
can
hard
be
though.
the full
Yeah.
person that I want to be,
Yeah.
and that I feel called to be.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's enough. What does your heart know?
My heart knows that now, that it's okay just to like pay attention to the questioning of like, is this all that there is? Like, is it what? Something seems a little off here. That it's not only okay to pay attention to, but it's my right and responsibility to at least have some space to explore that for myself, to better understand like the rumblings and yearnings that are happening beneath the surface.